The candlelight flickered across. Maria's face as she stared at the empty chair across from her, the one she'd reserved out of habit, out of hope, out of the stubborn refusal to accept that some tables were meant for one. It was her 3rd anniversary, not of a marriage, but of a loss, and she'd come to Giacomo's, the restaurant where her late husband had proposed, because sometimes grief demands we return to the places where love once lived. She didn't notice him at first, the man in the charcoal suit whose presence seemed to shift the very air in the room. Servers moved differently when he entered, their shoulders straightening, their voices dropping to reverent whispers. Angelo Russo wasn't just any patron at Giacomo's. He owned half the city, though his business cards never said so. What they whispered about him in the kitchen, Maria couldn't hear. What she did see was a man who moved like he'd forgotten what it meant to be uncertain about anything. Angelo had come to Giacomo's to meet someone who hadn't shown. A sign of disrespect, his men murmured. A problem to be handled, but as he scanned the dining room with those dark, calculating eyes, he found himself arrested by something unexpected. A woman sitting alone, not scrolling through her phone to appear busy, not pretending to read a book, but simply being present with her solitude in a way that seemed almost defiant. There was something about the set of her shoulders, the way she held her wine glass, not hiding, not performing, just existing in her grief with a dignity that made his chest tighten in a way he hadn't felt in years. "Signorina," he said, appearing at her table so suddenly she startled, wine nearly sloshing over the rim of her glass. "Forgive my intrusion, but I find myself in need of a wife tonight." Maria blinked up at him, wondering if she'd heard correctly. "Excuse me?" "Just for the evening," he clarified, his accent thick as espresso, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that should have frightened her, but somehow didn't. "There are men here, you see them, the 3 in the corner, who have come to test whether I've grown soft. A man alone appears vulnerable. A man with a beautiful woman at his side appears to have something worth protecting, something worth living for." She should have said no. Every instinct of self-preservation should have sent her running from this stranger with his dangerous eyes and his impossible request. But Maria had been playing it safe for 3 years, had been so careful, so small, so determined, not to take up too much space in a world that had already taken so much from her. "What do I have to do?" she heard herself asking. A smile ghosted across his lips, the first genuine expression she'd seen on his face. "Exactly what you were doing. Sit with me. Let me see you. Let them see that I am a man who knows how to cherish something precious." He sat without waiting for permission, and suddenly her table for one became something else entirely. He ordered in rapid Italian, his voice low and commanding, and within moments the staff transformed their setup, a second-place setting appearing as if by magic. A bottle of wine that probably cost more than her rent materialized, and the invisible wall that had separated her from the rest of the restaurant dissolved. "I'm Angelo," he said, pouring her wine with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent a lifetime reading people, reading rooms, reading the 1,000 tiny signals that separated safety from danger. "Maria," she replied, and something in his expression softened when she said her name, as if it meant something to him, as if it unlocked some door he'd kept carefully bolted. They talked, or rather she talked, and he listened with the kind of attention she'd forgotten existed. She told him about her husband, about the car accident that had taken him on a rainy Tuesday that had started like any other Tuesday, about how she'd kept coming to this restaurant, because letting go of the ritual felt like letting go of him entirely, about how lonely it was to love someone who existed only in memory. Angelo listened, and in listening revealed himself in ways he hadn't intended. He spoke of his own losses, a brother, young and idealistic, who'd believed their family business could be cleaned up from the inside and had paid for that belief with his life. A mother who'd died not knowing if her sons were good men or monsters. A life built on loyalty and fear in equal measure, where trust was currency and weakness was death. "Do you ever wish," Maria asked, emboldened by wine and the surreal intimacy of this strange arrangement, "that you could just be someone else? Someone ordinary?" "Every day," he admitted, and the rawness in his voice startled them both. "But we are what we are, no? The question is not what we wish to be, but what we do with what we are given." The men in the corner were watching, she realized. watching and waiting for something. She didn't understand the game being played, but she understood stakes, understood the weight of being seen, of mattering to someone even if just for a moment. On impulse, she reached across the table and took his hand. His fingers were warm, calloused in unexpected places, and when they closed around hers, she felt something she'd thought was gone forever, the electric current of human connection, of being tethered to another person in the present moment. Angelo's breath caught. Such a simple gesture, but in his world, touch was transaction, power play, domination. This was something else entirely. This was freely given. This was grace. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for being here, for seeing me." The evening unfolded like a dream. They ate. He insisted she try the ossobuco, fed her a bite from his own fork with surprising tenderness. They laughed. She told him about her disaster of a job interview, where she'd spilled coffee on the CEO, and his laugh was rusty, unpracticed, but real. They existed together in a bubble of temporary intimacy that felt both completely artificial and more honest than anything either had experienced in years. When the men in the corner finally left, tipping their heads in acknowledgement that whatever test they'd come to administer had been passed, Maria expected Angelo to leave too. The performance was over. She could return to her table for one. Instead, he ordered dessert. "I'm not who you think I am," he said as they shared tiramisu, the lady fingers soft with espresso and cream. "The things I've done, the man I am, I'm not good, Maria." "I'm not asking you to be good," she replied. "I'm just asking you to be human." Something cracked in his expression then, some carefully maintained wall crumbling. "I haven't felt human in a very long time." She thought of her own grief, her own isolation, the way she'd been going through the motions of living, without actually being alive. "Neither have I." As the restaurant emptied around them, as the servers began their closing rituals, Angelo made a decision that surprised even himself. He pulled a business card from his pocket and wrote something on the back. Not his office number, but something else. "This is my personal number," he said, sliding it across the table. "I don't give this to anyone. But if you ever need anything, if you ever just want to sit at a table and not be alone, call me." Maria looked at the card, at this offer from a stranger who was somehow not a stranger at all. "Why?" "Because tonight you saved my life," he said simply. "Not from those men, from myself. From the forgetting of what it means to be seen, to matter to someone even briefly." She pocketed the card, and they walked out together into the cool night air. His car waited, obscenely expensive, armored probably, a fortress on wheels. Her ancient Honda was parked 3 blocks away. They should have gone their separate ways. "Let me drive you home," he offered. "I don't think that's a good idea," she said, but she was smiling. "Probably not," he agreed. "But when have good ideas ever changed anything?" He drove her home, and they sat in her driveway talking for another hour. The conversation flowing like they were old friends catching up rather than strangers who'd shared an evening. When she finally opened the door to leave, he caught her hand. "Maria, tonight you were my wife, and I was a better man for it." She leaned back in, kissed his cheek gently. "Then maybe tomorrow you could try being that man again. Without me. For yourself." He called her 3 days later. Not to ask for another favor, not to pull her into his world, but simply to talk, to hear her voice, to remember what it felt like to connect. They met for coffee, then dinner, then walks in the park where no one knew his name or feared his reputation. Maria didn't fix Angelo. People aren't broken things to be repaired. But she reminded him that beneath the armor and the reputation, there was still a man capable of gentleness, of vulnerability, of change. And Angelo reminded Maria that her table didn't have to be set for one forever, that opening herself to possibility wasn't betraying her past but honoring it by choosing to keep living, keep feeling, keep showing up fully in her own life. 6 months later, they sat at Giacomo's again, at the same table. But this time, the empty chair was filled, and the reservation wasn't made out of grief but out of celebration. They weren't pretending to be married anymore. They were simply two people who'd found each other in the darkness and decided that together they could find their way toward light. The Mafia boss and the widow, the man who'd forgotten how to be human, and the woman who'd reminded him. Their story wasn't about saving each other, it was about choosing. every day to see the humanity in themselves and each other, even when the world made that choice difficult. Love, Maria had learned, wasn't always the thunderbolt romance of first meetings. Sometimes it was quieter. A hand reached across a table. A stranger's kindness when you'd forgotten kindness existed. The willingness to show up as your broken, imperfect self and trust that it would be enough. It was always enough.